Is granted. I call the honourable member for Page.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, I introduced two amendments to Australia's National Environment Law to ensure the continued protection of Australia's water resources from coal seam gas and large coal mining developments. The Australian government recently introduced a bill that amends the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act 1999, the EPBC Act, to support the implementation of Australian Government's one-stop shop reform for environmental approvals. Deputy Speaker, the bill includes an amendment to allow state and territories to make approval decisions in relation to the water trigger. Deputy Speaker, I have been carefully considering the Australian Government's amendments in relation to the one-stop shop and the water trigger. I have met with the Minister for Environment on a number of occasions, Greg Hunt, to discuss the concerns that my local community have in relation to coal seam gas development. I impressed upon him that it is of utmost importance that the community has confidence in the one-stop shop and the approval decisions made by the states and territories for CSG and large coal mining projects. To make sure that the states and territories maintain high environmental standards when making decisions relating to the water trigger, Deputy Speaker, I have introduced two amendments. The first amendment will make it mandatory for states and territories making approval decisions under bilateral agreements to seek and take into account the advice, and this is very important, Deputy Speaker, the Independent Expert Scientific Committee on Coal Seam Gas and Large Coal Mining. The second amendment, Deputy Speaker, gives the Independent Expert and Scientific Committee an additional function and allows the Federal Environment Minister to request its supplementary advice on high-risk coal seam gas and large coal mining developments assessed under the one-stop shop. The Commonwealth Minister can ask the IESC if their advice has been adequately considered. So, Deputy Speaker, my amendments ensure two things. Firstly, under bilateral agreements, decision-makers must seek or take into account the advice of the Independent Expert Scientific Committee on Coal Seam Gas. Currently, in some cases, this is not the case. The second amendment gives the IESC an additional function and, importantly, gives the Federal Environment Minister the ultimate final say and, indeed, the oversight of this. And an example would be, as I said, if the IESC doesn't believe their advice and opinion has been taken into account. These two amendments, Deputy Speaker, I believe strengthens not only the bill before us today, but indeed the water trigger legislation passed by the previous parliament. Water is crucial, Deputy Speaker. It's everything in regard to food production and a lot of other things that affects our daily life. There was a lot of concern in my community on this issue, Deputy Speaker, and it's been previously mentioned in this chamber, the Bentley and the concern shown by my local community in regard to this. This water trigger legislation and my amendments, with my two amendments, strengthens the protection of our waterways from CSG mining. This, together with the assurance framework that is included in the bill, which has evaluations or audits against the state and territory commitments in the bilateral agreements, transitional and 5-yearly reviews of bilateral agreements, reporting mechanisms and ongoing monitoring and continuous improvement mechanisms, and ultimately a call-in power for the Commonwealth Environment Minister. The call-in power will allow the Commonwealth Environment Minister to take back a project before it is approved by a state or territory if the project will result in or is likely to result in serious or irreversible environmental damage and a breach of the agreement. In extreme circumstances, the Minister has the power under the EPBC Act to suspend or cancel an entire agreement. Deputy Speaker, I commend these two amendments to the House.